This week on ANN, the Adventist Church moves its quinquennial meeting from the U.S. state of Indiana to Missouri.
Adventist media in Australia is impacted by new Facebook regulations in the country.
And we are counting down to the launch of Heroes 2.
These stories and more coming up.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
The Executive Committee of the Seventh-day Adventist Church voted Wednesday, February 17, to move the 2022 General Conference, or GC session, the quinquennial business meeting of the denomination, from Indianapolis, Indiana, to St. Louis, Missouri, also located in the United States.
The vote comes after GC management was unexpectedly informed by the city of Indianapolis that the space in Indianapolis was no longer available for the June 6 through 11, 2022 dates. These dates voted by the General Conference Executive Committee will remain the same.
President of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church, Ted N.C. Wilson, said of the change, "The announcement to us that the dates in Indianapolis were not available came as a complete surprise, since we had taken this information to the GC Executive Committee. The officials in Indianapolis have been gracious, but found they were unable to provide the verbally confirmed dates. We felt badly about not continuing the wonderful collaboration with the Lake Union Conference, Lake Region Conference, and the Indiana Conference. However, God had already foreseen the problem, and through helpful contacts with the St. Louis Convention Center, the exact same dates of June 6th through the 11th, 2022 were provided. God always is going before us to open the way."
The Adventist Church Executive Committee had originally voted during the 2016 Annual Council to return to St. Louis for the 2025 GC session.
This new development comes after a January 12 vote from ExCom members to postpone the GC session originally scheduled for late June of 2020 for a second time due to continued challenges arising from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Although the GC session will now be held in St. Louis in the Mid-America Union instead of the Lake Union Conference, the two unions will join together to collaborate in evangelism and mission ahead of the meetings.
Wilson expressed his confidence that the 2022 session will be a time for Adventists to come together to share Jesus with the world. Leading up to the General Conference session, we look forward to a marvelous evangelistic working relationship with the Mid-America Union Conference and the Lake Union Conference, which both encompass the greater St. Louis region, he said. "What a privilege to proclaim the three angels' messages and Christ's soon coming in a united way in total member involvement. As our 2022 GC session theme says, Jesus is coming, get involved."
Adventist media in Australia has been impacted by a fight between the social media platform Facebook and the Australian government. Facebook has banned the sharing of Australian news content on its platform, including content created by Adventist Record, Signs of the Times, and Mums at the Table. The social media giant blocked content on February 18 in response to the Australian government's new media bargaining bill, which proposes that big tech companies pay media companies for news content. Groups such as Science and Technology Australia, the Bureau of Meteorology, and many others have also been blocked, leading to health and safety concerns, especially with wild weather and bushfires alerts going out. Editor of the Adventist Record, the Adventist News Organization for the Church in the South Pacific, Jared Stackelroth, expressed his surprise at the situation. "Waking up to find Facebook had banned all of our content was a shock. We have no way to know how long this might last or what ongoing impact it will have on our ability to share Adventist news around the South Pacific Division. The changes mean that any media pages' posts are no longer appearing, and content is unable to be shared. Countries outside of Australia cannot access Adventist media's content either." Stackelroth said, "This week's events have got me thinking about how, as Christians, we use the platforms available to us. This Facebook ban has been building for a while, and Google may follow suit. We must be effective disciples in every area we can, sharing the good news of Jesus. There may come a day when private organizations like Facebook and Google, and even governments, ban Christian content or Christian individuals from public platforms because of the things we believe."
The Seventh-day Adventist Church in the North Caribbean Conference, which oversees a cluster of islands in the British and United States Virgin Islands, recently announced the purchase of a radio station thanks to a partnership with Adventist World Radio. As the new owner of WGOD 97.9 FM, the Adventist Church will be able to launch and enhance radio ministry.
President of the Adventist Church in the North Caribbean Conference, Desmond James, said this acquisition could not have come at a more opportune time, when the church in the North Caribbean Conference is remodeling its media ministry to be more diverse, more inclusive, and more relevant as we give urgency to the proclamation of our message and the powerful fulfillment of your mission. This is a tremendous achievement for the church, and we are doing all we can moving forward with the guidance of God.
WGOD FM is owned by the Three Angels Broadcasting Company and Reynold Charles, a Seventh-day Adventist on the island. The station features a mix of teaching programs and Christian music.
The radio station will continue to serve through the internet and the airwaves, a population of approximately 250,000, including some 16,000 church members.
Additional studio equipment has been acquired in preparation for the transition, and the antenna will be refurbished to maximize the reach of the station. Improvements are expected to begin on the existing building, and personnel will be sourced in the coming months.
Coming up, we are counting down the days to the release of the new game Heroes 2 by talking to the Adventist World Church Youth Director, Gary Blanchard.
We'll be right back after the break.
Any idea what time it is?
We really need our sleep.
Are you from? No, we're not from the future, but we know you only pay attention to yourselves, so here we are.
But how? We have no time for that. We have less than 30 seconds.
Fact number 1. Adults need 7 hours of sound, restful sleep to keep their immune systems healthy and to fight viruses. And today, right now, is the single most important thing you can do to keep yourself healthy. What are you doing?
We're just Googling if spicy foods cause hallucinations.
Fact 2. Staring at your phone or your computer right before bed prevents sound sleep. And you'll be tired the next day. And nobody got time for that.
Can we just go to bed, please?
We may look, pray, read, think, worship, sing, and share differently, but we all look forward to the Sabbath. And we all look forward to the future when Jesus will come again. With this message in mind, we arrived at a core component for a new identity system, the creation grid, a simple 7-column structure for layout. The grid is a reference both to the prophetic timeline as well as to the creation week that culminated in the 7th-day Sabbath. The first 6 columns of the grid belong to the designer. They can be filled with anything: text, images, illustrations, patterns, and logos. But the 7th column, the Sabbath column, does not belong to them. It is meant to be different and special. Regardless of what or where you are designing, you can always find information to help you communicate that we are all Seventh-day Adventists.
Welcome back.
We are counting down the days to the release of Heroes 2 on March 25th.
Every day for 33 days leading up to the launch of Heroes, the Adventist Church is releasing a new video to show a different part of the game.
The videos include Bible biographies, which I have been hosting, and these go in depth about the Bible heroes featured in the games, behind-the-scenes conversations with the developers, and we even go through the game and explain how to use the different effects.
This week on ANN, Sam Neves talked to the youth director for the Adventist World Church, Gary Blanchard, about heroes and what he thinks makes a hero today.
A long time ago, there was a lot of conversation about identity and our Christian identity and identity in Jesus and so on. And Steve Jobs said once that reinstilling identity is very easy. You just need to remind people of who their heroes are. And that's part of why this game has come out, you know, in terms of trying to remind people of how strong and courageous and fantastic these
Bible heroes were, also how flawed and how terrible they were at times, but they kept focusing on God, and that made all the difference. How do you have any heroes in the Bible that you associate with or that you admire more than others?
You know, there's a lot of them in the Bible, but I would say if I was thinking of one right now besides Jesus, I would say Daniel, the prophet Daniel. My goodness, what an incredible story of a young man who was in a secular university but shone brightly for Jesus and was even willing to share the good news, the gospel, with the great King Nebuchadnezzar. A phenomenal story about a young man who had integrity in a very in an environment that did not have integrity, but he stood for God really strong. Exciting story.
Yeah. What do you think that made him, and not just him, but what is it that makes a hero, do you think?
Well, you know, what I think is a person who is willing to live for God, though the heavens fall upon them. What I mean is they're willing to stand true for the Lord, even when things are turning against them all around. And that's one of the things we see with Daniel. We see it with his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These guys were willing to stand up for God, not when it was popular, but especially when it wasn't. And it was because of this that they became heroes, not only to us reading the Bible, but definitely to those people living in those times who watched them. I mean, they were inspirational. They were even able to turn the heart of a wicked king back to God. Unbelievable, Sam.
They managed to live in a very polarized society. You're either with the king or you were a rebel, but they managed to stand up without arrogance.
Yeah.
Our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow down, kin. This is where we draw the line. Sure. And I think we need a generation, Gary, that is willing to draw the line, right? That to say, I'm from this point onwards, I will go no further. And this may bring persecution. This may bring cancellation in this cancel society. This may bring all sorts of things that are negative. Is it still worth pursuing what Jesus has taught us and to stand up for Jesus, even if the circumstances are not favorable?
You know what I love about the Lord, Sam, is that his laws and his word is not arbitrary. In other words, he doesn't just come up with a bunch of laws and rules for your life because he can and he's God. No, usually those laws are always those laws and those guidelines that he gives us are for our good. So when we walk in God's ways, we actually find more fulfillment, more joy in this life. So God is wonderful. His laws are not made to chain us down, imprison us. They're actually made to set us free. One of my favorite quotes I heard some time ago, I hope I can say this right. It says something like this: all disciples are believers, but not all believers are disciples. And I believe that probably defines Christianity today. It's true that every single disciple of Jesus believes that Jesus is their Savior. And that's really important. But there are many people in the world today who are believers in Jesus, but they're not really his disciples. They're not following him. They're not living for him. And that's why there's so much sadness and pain and suffering, even within the church today. But Sam, if we would not only be believers in the Lord Jesus, but followers of Christ, that's when we would find a lot of joy, like I believe Daniel did.
Look, I think that we need every opportunity for older generations to become the heroes of new generations. We don't like being heroes or being called heroes. I get it. Our hero is Jesus. He is right here. That's Amen. The boss right there. So Amen. Jesus is the hero, sure. But I know some heroes in my life that I admired and that I still admire. And I look up to them and I see how they emulate Jesus. And I want to follow them, their living example. The Apostle Paul says this. He says, copy me as I'm copying Christ. Follow me as I'm following Christ. Look at me. Look at how I'm doing this. This is what God expects from you. Emulating that perfectly. Now, obviously, it's not going to be perfect. We're never going to reach a point here that we're going to emulate Jesus perfectly. We're going to be trying to do this for eternity. But best we can, we need to be seen by younger generations so that they can look up and say, I want to be like her. I want to be like him. And in local churches, one possibility, and we've seen this before, is to go around any project. It could be Pathfinders, it could be Heroes the Game, it could be any project. But you share stories of how when you were in this situation many years ago. And I know that sometimes we think children are tired of hearing, in my day, this is what it used to be like. It's so important. And even if young people may reject it, we need to keep saying it because they are lost. I think I started theology when I was 17 years old. And when I look back to that young Sam, what did I know? Nothing. I needed people to help me. I needed heroes then. And I only could discover those heroes by listening to them, by listening to their story. How do you suggest we do this from a local church perspective? How can we, cross these generations in a way that they can interact more and not be totally siloed?
Yeah, I think it's totally unnatural for a young person to not want to listen to the older generation. I believe this mentality of not listening to the older generation has taught them through the media and through Hollywood to disrespect the older generation. So it's not a natural thing. I think it's natural for young people to listen to the older generation, to care, to want to learn from them. And so what needs to happen in our churches is we need to stop talking badly about the older generation. And we hear things like, the youth need to lead the church. Oh, come on now. What does that mean for the older generation? Really, what we need to be saying is we together need to lead the church and need to move forward. So I hear a lot of pastors say things like, the youth are the church of today. Okay, that sounds really good. And probably most of the older generation would clap as well. But if you stop and think about it, what are they really saying?
We're not. We're gone. Yeah, we're past our sell-by date.
So then you have this generation of young people who are kind of upset with the older generation for leading, for being in position and for directing the church because they've been taught that that's not the right thing to do. We're supposed to be leading, but that's not at all biblical. Even the heroes in the Bible that we're talking about had older generation that they leaned on and learned from. They got on the shoulders of giants, shoulders of those who came before them. They didn't disrespect the shoulders they were on. And to me, I think that's what needs to be brought back into the local churches. Now, don't misunderstand me. There are some adults that really keep the younger generation down. They don't want them to be involved. And so they kind of push them out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing. But that's not what we're talking about here. There are many, many God-fearing leaders, especially in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who want young people to be involved. And so we need to be encouraging that. And like Elijah mentored Elisha, our leaders listening right now, your responsibility is to mentor and care for the younger generation so that they can grow to become even better leaders than you are.
Coming up, David Trim is here for This Week in Adventist History.
But up next, how little acts of kindness in Indonesia made a big impact.
When I first felt called to be a minister, I didn't want to be a typical pastor with a suit and a tie. One of the things I appreciated most about Christ was his ability to defy convention. Once, when I moved away from a place where I was pastoring, one of my friends said, "We're going to miss you. You're so unusual." I take that as a compliment. I'm someone who likes a challenge. I love to test my limits. I've been running for more than 35 years, most days of the week. I love to run, especially in nature. It's time alone with God where I can recharge. I run first thing in the morning, so I can prepare emotionally and spiritually for whatever I might experience that day. I find my greatest fulfillment in relating to people who aren't Adventist or even Christian. We have to meet people where they are. That's what Jesus did, and it's still our responsibility today. I have friends who are Christians and atheists, gay and straight, old and young, of all races and ethnicities. I'm a biker, a runner, and a pastor. I'm extremely blessed. My name is Stephen Chavez, and this is my whole life.
Hi, VL. How are you? Are you okay? Dear VL, I can't even remember how long we've been staying at home now because of this virus. For now, it's just nice to hear your voice and see your face. Nothing beats playing outside in the dirt though. Which reminds me, are your hands clean? Yes! Mommy and Daddy says not a lot of kids get COVID-19, but it's always nice to be extra safe. We should wash our hands before picking our nose. Why washing our hands protects us, but it also keeps us from spreading the virus. In case we touch something dirty, let's always be clean and safe, okay? Love, Joey.
Welcome back.
Moon Dar-e loved making new friends, and he wanted to find ways to serve the Lord.
He decided to make a difference in the lives of the visually impaired in Indonesia.
Adventist Mission has more.
One small step can be a huge leap of faith for the Lord. Mundari, a local church member in the city of Manado, Indonesia, decided to make a difference by doing little acts of kindness for people who are visually impaired. He loves to try new things and make friends. After one busy day at work, he felt so tired and decided that he needed a massage. He went to a rehabilitation center for visually impaired people to find out if he could get a massage from one of the students. The center had just finished a training course for a massage, and one of the students kindly offered to practice his new skills on Mundari. During the massage, Mundari started to talk with the student. They talked about work, church, and life in general. Mundari was able to share about his church and the Bible. The small talk grew deeper, and by the end of the massage, the student was very interested in what he'd learned from Mundari. That simple massage began Mundari's friendship not only with his student, but also with other people staying in the rehabilitation center. It didn't take long before Mundari started a ministry in the center and reached out to more students.
The reason why we serve our visually impaired friends is that when Jesus was in this world, He cared for them. He touched their eyes and healed them. Therefore, as Christ followers, we extend compassion to our visually challenged friends.
Mundari learned from his friend that the center allowed worship services for all their Christian students. This created many opportunities for Mundari and his church to minister to the students through medical missionary work and worship services.
We are so happy for the opportunity to reach out to our visually impaired friends here in Manado, especially from the Adventists. They need care, acceptance from the society. The institution shouldn't be the only one responsible for their rehabilitation. This group of people also needs compassion and support from the community, so they can live normally and be accepted by the society. We aim to teach them to live independently after their training in this institution.
The staff and the director for the rehabilitation center are grateful for the activities conducted by the local Adventist Church.
The reason why I'm so happy is because I understand that not all visually impaired individuals receive the same attention and care from the community. We're glad to know that Adventists care for us. I know that there are some organizations and churches that visit us here once a year, but the Adventist Church makes it a priority to visit us here regularly.
Outside the rehabilitation center, Mundari took his friendships with the visually impaired to another level. He invited them to come and worship at his church on Sabbath, and many went. It was a wonderful experience to see them singing praises and hymns. Not being able to see is in itself a huge challenge for the visually impaired. Mundari has resolved in his heart not only to share a description of God's beautiful creation here on earth, but also to point them to heaven.
I know Adventists really care for us, and based on our experience, I trust that Adventists are always ready to serve us and be with us.
Please pray for Mundari and the church members who are serving our friends in Manado, Indonesia. Pray for our visually impaired friends who recently joined this group and discovered love, truth, and community through this ministry.
Watch this and other mission stories online by visiting adventistmission.org. Then click on videos at the top.
And finally, for today's episode, let's turn to David Trim for a look at Adventist history.
This week, we hear an example of total member involvement from the 1860s.
Welcome to This Week in Seventh-day Adventist History. On February 23 in 1868, Isaac Van Horn organized a Seventh-day Adventist Church in Bowersville, Ohio. Van Horn, who you see here, later became known as a pioneer preacher on the U.S. West Coast. But early in his career, he worked in the Midwest, which was the early stronghold of Seventh-day Adventism. But Ohio, the state of Ohio, was not a stronghold. The largest congregation of Seventh-day Sabbath keepers there was in Gilboa, but they were hostile to any organization above the local congregation, and there was also some sentiment against Ellen White. Van Horn was able to organize the church in Bowersville because of the work done by a dedicated layman, William Cottrell. He and his wife were isolated from other Sabbath keepers, but were determined not to remain so. William started visiting from home to home, sharing his faith in 1866, and eventually, nearly 2 years later, Van Horn was sent to build on Cottrell's work. It's an early Adventist example of total member involvement. 86 years and 1 day later, on February 24, 1954, Edward and Ruth Dirksen arrived in Georgetown, Guyana, then part of the British West Indies. Edward was a physician and had been called to direct the work of a recently founded clinic in Georgetown, capital of Guyana. This was the first Adventist medical missionary work in that country. By the end of the year, so that is just in the first 10 months, Dr. Dirksen had treated a total of 5,295 patients, half of them charity cases, whose expenses the church covered for free. Edward and Ruth Dirksen spent 3 years in Guyana. As a result of their work before they left in 1955, the clinic had been converted into a hospital, which was subsequently named after Ovid Davis, a pioneer missionary to the indigenous peoples in the mountains of Guyana. Davis Memorial Clinic and Hospital still operates today as a 40-bed hospital. That was This Week in Adventist History.
Thanks for watching ANN. Join us next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Did you know the Adventist Church has a YouTube channel where you can watch ANN Video, ANN In-Depth, and plenty other amazing videos on prophecy, health, and Bible study?
Just go to YouTube and search for the Adventist Church. Make sure you click the subscribe button to stay caught up each week.
And remember, leave a comment or a prayer request. We have people who are praying for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Before we say goodbye, here's some good news from the book of Nahum, chapter 1, verse 7.
The passage says, "The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in him."
That's our program for this week. And remember, you can always visit adventist.news for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.